Welcome to Dear Business Coach, the podcast. My name's Elizabeth. Find one thing to move your business forward today with conversations, spotlights, interviews, articles, and free resources. Listen and follow and subscribe on social media. Dear Business Coach pages and groups. Dear Business Coach podcast. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and don't forget Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, anywhere you listen to podcasts. All it takes sometimes is one little thing to move your business forward today. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Liam, thank you for coming to the Dear Business Coach podcast today. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, well, you know what? I would like to get into some of the get into the deep end with you a little bit, but before I do, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your background. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Liam O'Neill. I'm the managing director of a little management consultancy called BPMD. Started in consulting just a little over 10 years ago now. Started working for this little tiny startup, working in my boss's attic, and then stayed with that same company through several ups, several downs, and eventually ended up taking it over as we were coming out of COVID. So I've been running BPMD now for going on 3 years, growing the company about 30% year on year, setting what's a consistent and really solid growth path in place. So we've got to a place now where we're leading the business in a really exciting space, but more than anything, we've got a team in place that is really energized. We're really putting employees first. I think we're trying to challenge some of the cultural norms that you find with consultancy.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you. I actually am curious to know. So you said you you took over BPMD during COVID. What happened? Why was that your turn to take over?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a crazy year. So when it was lockdown, well, strange things happened pretty much everywhere, I think. But for me, it went from having essentially no responsibility in my life to, in 1 year, the company shifted, some of the senior team left, and there was some uncertainty at the very top with some health challenges. And I stepped up to take on the company. At the same time, in the same year, I also found out I was having my first child, got engaged, and got a house. So I had this fantastic streak of getting a lot of life milestones ticked off. The only downside was I did start going grey that year as well. So would highly recommend. It was a great year, but also my herd did suffer as a
Hey, listeners, don't forget to subscribe to email if you haven't already. Do this at dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. And if you are a new subscriber, look for the magazine coming up. You can get a free download as a new subscriber. That's dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. Thanks so much, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, you are a superstar. Well, so you know what, as they say, life happens. Sometimes that's
Definitely.
wow. So, oh my goodness. So you got thrown into the hot seat kind of. And in this world of consulting, have you what was kind of your expectations of the consulting world before you got put into leadership or put yourself into leadership?
Yeah, so I always wanted to my initial drive when I first wanted to set off on my career was I wanted to learn as much as possible, come down to London to see how a lot of the well-established companies were being run, and then I always wanted to take that back to my hometown, which is a place called Wigan. It's in the north of England near Manchester, and essentially take what I learned and bring it to that place, start my own business and start something that really reflected my values. So the learning piece definitely came to the fore, definitely had, I'd say, a crash course in building a lot of capability around process enablement, digital transformation, and just learning how to work and interact in a professional environment. But then when push came to shove, instead of making that jump and coming back to my hometown, I recognised that you can still have that space where you can be yourself, you can build a business that reflects your values, and you don't need to go to your hometown to do that. You can do that where you are. So I started to push some changes into BPMD. Essentially, what I wanted to do was not be another consultancy where it had the kind of hangover of the historic culture that goes with consultancies, where there's a commoditization of people's time, where people are seen in this transactional nature, an employee is a resource, and that hours are the only value to the organization. Instead, I wanted to challenge that. I wanted to recognize we can do some really interesting things if we have an ambitious, highly motivated team. We're not going to do boring, slow paced projects where it's just about having spare hands. We're going to do things that push a boundary a little bit and demand that little bit more ambition, that little bit more drive, that little bit of innovation. And that's what I've really worked to build.
So was that difficult as a younger leader to talk to or the organization about your vision?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some challenges with coming into a leadership role earlier in your career, especially if you're in an industry like tech or one of those industries where there's this real kind of entrepreneurial spirit. You see a lot of younger leaders. I've done quite a bit of work with Trainline in the UK, a tech company. And generally across the board, it's got a slightly younger workforce. And I think people are very much bought into that. But I also work in some traditional industries like shipping and logistics, where the seniority does have a really high correlation with years in service. And consultancy is a little bit of a midpoint. It's very much internally. I don't think age is too much of a barrier. It's about capability. But when it does come to sales and putting out that view of your business to the market, that's where there can be some challenges. And I think there's ways you can overcome it, but it's always going to be a drawback against it's always going to be a bit of a drawback for some clients. And I think that comes down to defining who we're targeting, what market we really want to go after. Do we want to go for these companies where having 20, 30, 40 years experience with grey hairs is something that they highly value? Or do we want to start to target those companies where they recognize the whole industry is shifting? There's new technologies and the old ways of doing things aren't now the best ways. So let's try and find those companies who are interested in doing things in a new way, want to take on this innovative approach, and because of that, they value having a young, dynamic team as opposed to relying, falling back on having those with the years and masses of experience backing up. Instead of just falling back on having those really long in the tooth. I'm so sorry, I completely lost the trail there. Yeah, so I think it's valuable finding those companies where your values match and they want to try those innovative, new, young approaches that are going to do things in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, you know what? It's a funny question. I guess it could be either taken as an odd question, or it can be taken as, the same old question we always ask, right? Are the folks who have been there a long time going to accept change and be interested in the younger folks coming in? And I don't actually know how old you are. I am making a judgment that you're younger, and that's a broad statement, right? But I like the term long in the tooth. There is value uh, to make sure that the leadership and the systems that, as we say, are working, right? If it isn't broke, don't fix it. Stay in place, and that the seniority and the processes that are important to those industries are valued, and we don't just scrap things that are important to a particular business's process. So I'm curious to always ask someone like yourself about how you see working with different generations, because that's something that comes up a lot in conversations that I have. I'm always impressed with leadership who knows that there is the value to blending the generations. So it's interesting that you say that you will see sort of a younger age group in tech, and then there are industries where you might expect older generations. So when I think about consulting, right, I'm just asking you, the name of the show is Dear Business Coach Podcast. And what that means often for me is I'm asking you questions like this as far as perceptions and judgments, right? So these are the things that I think we kind of want to get rid of sometimes. And as someone who's in consulting, I imagine you have a lot of, you deal a lot with that, right? People's expectations, people's preconceived notions about what's going to happen. And like you just said a minute ago about being a fear potentially, well, I'm using the word fear, you didn't use the word fear, but the idea that potentially when a consultant comes to help, there will be the people will be looked at transactionally, and that's definitely something we see in the movies all the time. The consultant teams coming in, and we're going to basically calculate every person down to a number and figure out how to revamp everything. And when I talked to you before, you really spent your time uh, making sure that I heard you say the inside of the process improvement. And I wrote down the word or the phrase
Yeah.
employee value reset. And reading my notes before getting on the meeting with you today, I was remembering the feeling that I was getting from you about wanting to make the process for the internal teams kind of baked in. So you're kind of wanting to think about building um, from the inside out. So where and I also wrote down how your internal teams raise ideas as part of how you include people in the process or build the process.
Yeah.
So those are my notes around, what I think Liam's perspectives might be. So I'm here today, hopefully, to get some leadership perspective from you, obviously, to get some plug for your team and your business. So, but also, what does Liam do as a leader? So maybe, when BPMD would come to the table, what does that value reset look like for you?
Yeah. So our core differentiator, what we really bring to market, is that when we work with companies, what we try to do is set up an internal process excellence team. That's a team internally who can almost act as their own consultants. We don't want them to rely on us long term.
Mm,
So with Philips, with Merce, with Knife, with a whole host of companies, what we've done is go in and find those people in the business who have a passion for understanding how things work and wanting to make them a little bit better. And then we give them the tools to be able to go and do that for their organization. So they don't need to rely on us or any other consultancy long term. A business really needs to own its own capability to improve itself. And I think it's really interesting you mentioned before the value in some of those long in the tooth processes. And there's not a one size fits all answer. You can't just rip everything out and start from scratch. There's
mm,
some things that are done in a legacy way because they're really important. And I always fall back on, I was doing some work with an offshore oil drilling company, and it's a fantastically complex business. Like there's so much regulation, so much heavy machinery that needs to be maneuvered about to be able to get these offshore oil rigs working and doing so safely. But we were going through the sales and life cycle of setting up an oil rig.
mm,
And across it, there's a lot of things they do that are very outdated, things that can't be brought into kind of a modern business ecosphere and be done a lot more efficiently. But there's
mm,
some things that really do need a human touch. And I was talking with this fantastic senior Danish guy, and he did a lot of sales for when they're setting up and building these contracts for these offshore oil rigs. And I was talking with him, and he was talking about how the sales go through. And we were just investigating how he does it, what's his process, what's his approach for doing it. As we're talking through, he says he does this analysis, he keeps a track of his contacts, and then what he'll do, he'll go meet with them, and then he'll use Napkin to write down the deal details. I said, oh great, is that a system? Can I have a look at the system? And he looked at me like I was a bit silly, and he said, sure. And he pulled out from his pocket a pack of tissues, he brought out a napkin and said, this is where we write the details. And these multi-million-pound deals were being hashed out over dinner on the back of a napkin. And that's a kind of piece of insight, that's a kind of really valuable experience. But you can't just automate away. You can't just revise a new process. That relies on those people who know exactly what they're doing, they know the industry, they know who they're talking to, they can speak that language. And you can't just throw that away. That's the really valuable element of a business. We need to embed and build around those really core processes, those really core experiences and capabilities that sit in the team.
Yeah, I mean, and that, that is a movie scene right there, isn't it? Right? And also it kind of seems like if I'm that person, right, that's working on the back of a napkin in a meeting, that is a way that I keep my information private. It's all up here and nobody else can have it. And so there's something to that too. And yeah, and the way that a sale goes through, right? How does that contract get completed is also uh a part of the art of how that business works. And so I would be fully intimidated to go into somebody else's business and even ask, show me how you do this. So now what do you think? What do you think is important right now for BPMD to tell people, right? What is it that as you are branding and expanding, what do you want people to know about you?
Yeah, sure. So the core concept we're built on, as I said before, is that a company being able to understand what it does and then improve it it's not a nice to have capability. It's absolutely essential. We're getting into a space where with AI, with automation, with just the pace of change, the ability to adapt the way you work isn't something that's optional, it's something that's really critical. So no matter the size of your business, you need to have that capability in-house, that
Mm.
ability to reflect on what you're doing and to do it better. That's the journey we take a lot of our clients on, but even if you don't engage in external consultancy, even if you're a smaller business, making sure you set time aside to reflect on what it is that you're doing, looking at the market and what it is you could be doing a little bit better. It's absolutely essential to stay competitive.
Yeah, I mean, you actually, the word reflective, taking time to reflect on your process, is something that I usually hear from a personal business coach, right, who is looking at me as someone that is needing individual help somewhere in my emotional mental psyche and inside my business. So that's actually pretty rare. I don't know that I've heard a consultant use that word, take time to reflect. And also as someone who might be considered an outsider at first, if you are asking me to reflect upon my business and my business processes, knowing that we're looking at this for improvement, I also might feel a little bit guarded. I'm not sure how well I'm going to be able to share that reflection with you. Does it take time for you and that leadership team to understand what it is? Do you guys have to sort of hash out what it is that you guys mean by what are we reflecting on? What are we looking for?
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends. It varies by level. With when you come into shape up a transformation program, the different types of industry, the different types of person you meet, they'll have different pushbacks based on that. Generally, at kind of a really senior level, what you've got to do is build sponsorship by appealing to the senior challenges. What is it that the CEO, the CIO, the CTO, what is it that they care about? If it's a COO, they're not too interested in kind of soft benefits like increased process visibility or slightly better customer experience. They care about the tangible outcomes, being able to reduce costs or increase throughput, increase production, something that really affects the bottom line. So you have to understand their motivations and shape a program that addresses that. And then as you filter through the business, not everyone is going to care about the same thing. As you get kind of down into the heads of functions and then further down, there's going to be different challenges, different problems that they want addressed. I think really core to any transformation initiative is making sure you have a sponsorship at the outset, but then being able to translate the work you're doing into how it makes people's lives better. If you're looking at automation, say you're looking at going through an order to cash, from someone placing an order with your company to it being shipped on a truck to the site, to then invoicing and receiving payment, you might be looking at the back end accounts receivable, and you might be wanting to bring some of the costs down, maybe do it a bit more quickly, a bit more automated. But when you're talking to your accounts receivable clerks, what their challenges are going to be aren't the same as the head of finance. They might just absolutely hate the OCR tool, the scanning tool that they've got, and it perpetually picks up the wrong information. It means they're sat there manually keying in a ton of data, and it day to day eats up the whole day. So when you're shaping these transformation initiatives, you solve those little problems that can contribute to the bigger picture, but you make sure you bring the people on the journey as well, because the accounts receivable clerk at the end of the day is the one whose process is going to be changing.
Yeah, that's a really okay. So right, we were talking about process, and I like these vocabulary words are important. And I often ask folks, what do you mean by that word? And so right now we just touched on something really important where you are saying day to day processes, as well as bringing those things to light. You said, I think the phrase bringing the people along with you. And so does the department head, does the CEO, does the COO, for example, get to see that individual on the floor is actually having trouble with their equipment? If that scanning equipment isn't giving them the right information when they need it, and they have to stop and enter something in manually, I'm getting mad thinking about being in that position. I mean, I'm mad, very frustrated. And so I would that's if I had to do that all day long or several times a day, I wouldn't even know where to start. That would be my first issue. I would say to management, I can't even talk about anything else you're interested in until we fix this thing I have to do one time 1,000 times a day.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. There is this massive disconnect sometimes. The view from kind of 10,000 feet from a boardroom is so different to what it is on the ground. And for some companies, they're too big to be able to translate that up efficiently. If you're looking at, someone like Maersk or someone like Philips, we're talking multi-billion pound, multi-billion dollar enterprises with tens of thousands of employees. It's not feasible for the CFO to understand exactly what's going on the ground. So there are tools there to help translate it, but having a good internal excellence program, what that does is it takes those senior sponsors' objectives, and then it understands the underlying business through data, through process, through interviews, whatever that may be, and then it shapes up a change program. But it keeps feeding that back to those senior stakeholders, giving them a little bit of visibility into what is actually going on, and helping to use that to inform a change program. So it's not based off some obscure idea of what best practice looks like. You're not just lifting and shifting exactly what it is that a software vendor is trying to sell you and saying this is exactly how we should be doing it. So it's recognizing there's a business in play, there's people working really hard, and then taking what they're doing, finding how we can do that a little bit better. And sorry, one second.
Okay. Actually, I would like to turn my fan off over here. It's really
Printer just
loud.
starts exploding in the background. So sorry.
No, that's fine. I have a heater on the side here that was loud and it was bothering me, so I wanted to turn that off too. Let me see here. Do I have my okay? So we are actually just about out of time. I mean, I can ask you another couple questions, but I'm sure that you have the people to talk to that need your help. So I will try to keep it short.
I'm not too stretched. I can do it on 5-10 if you have time.
Okay. Well, then let me just maybe focus on one last question, because it's really easy to start asking you to pick your brain apart, and I feel really comfortable with you. I feel like I could ask you anything. I wonder, what is it that when you've mentioned you've mentioned small businesses, and I'm glad you say that, because I've said movies, we're talking about big titles of folks in management and leadership and ownership, and that paints a picture for me of very large businesses. And it sounds like you are also expressing to me that this is important. Consulting is helpful and important for small businesses. So is that true? Do small businesses need your help too?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as I say, I think any organization needs to be able to understand what it's doing and do it a little bit better. Where consultancies can be helpful is in twofold. They provide additional capacity when you've got a big challenge you need to get over the hump on, and they can bring specialist capabilities in, experience from other industries, from other types of projects. You can bring that to the fore and help to develop that in another organization. Where I think it can be a little bit dangerous is when you have a long-term dependency on a consultancy.
Hmm.
You don't really want to be outsourcing a really core capability as an organization if you want to manage kind of risk profiles. So, as a smaller organization who's growing, when you want to bring on new capabilities, you want to be able to do process excellence and shape your business in the best possible way. It can be really useful to look external, look to consultancies, look to businesses and people who've done it before and see what works. I've run, must be 50, 60 improvement programs at this point, and they were absolutely not all the same. And there's been plenty of bumps along the way, things that haven't gone quite right, things that have been really good learning experiences. I remember we used to do improvement workshops, and we'd have day one and then day two, and then there was a ton of work that needs to happen between them. So initially, what we used to do was we'd do day one, then me and a couple of the other consultants would work until about 2 a.m. to try and get something ready for day two. So you go into day two, content that had a 2 a.m. brain working on it, so plenty of typos, and the presenter who looked a bit worse for wear. So there's some of these things, some scheduling, some tips, some tricks that you only learn through experience, and that's where consultants can bring that raw capability to the fore.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I don't want to be that person looking worse for wear. Come on in and help. Okay, so let's see. Now you actually you gave me your LinkedIn profile earlier. So right now, the way that people can talk to you and find you and listen to this interview, aside from the podcast stream, um, is to see you online. So to get to know Liam, we're going to put your LinkedIn profile on the screen, and that's also in the show notes. So is that an okay? That's where you would like people to be able to look at you and your content is on LinkedIn. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I'm focusing a bit more on LinkedIn now, trying to put out at least a video or a couple of videos a week, just talking through some of the intricacies of the process excellence space, from process modeling to process mining to a whole host of other bits and bobs that really address how you can make sure your business is as excellent as is possible. So LinkedIn is absolutely the best place to find me and find some content and tips and tricks that I hope are useful for you and your viewers.
Yeah. Well, and so that's Liam O'Neill. And what also, as I said earlier, not while we were recording, I need to make sure to say while we're recording, to look for Liam's article in the Dear Business Coach podcast magazine coming up at next release. And also for email subscribers, this episode is highlighted in the weekly email. So Liam, thank you so much for coming to the Dear Business Coach podcast. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that I should highlight for you today?
No, I think you did an amazing job. I think you covered a lot of ground, and no, it's an absolute pleasure being on. Thank you so much for having me, and I really look forward to seeing this in on Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. All streaming platforms, and come back when you can.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay. Thank you, and talk to you soon.
Hey,
Hey, listeners, don't forget to subscribe to email if you haven't already. Do this at dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. And if you are a new subscriber, look for the magazine coming up. You can get a free download as a new subscriber. That's dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. Thanks so much, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, you are a superstar.